Welcome back to Talk Tickers, everybody. We are diving deep today into Macrogenix's latest earnings call for Q4 2024. Really trying to unpack all the key takeaways for you, especially for the more experienced investors out there.
Sounds good to me.
Macrogenix, first off, had a really significant jump in total revenue this year.
Yeah, big year for them, 150 million in revenue for the full year. I mean, that's a massive increase compared to the, 58.7 million they reported in the previous year.
Yeah, so we're talking almost three times jump in revenue.
Right. A lot of that growth coming from collaborations and other agreements, which brought in a very significant chunk, 118.9 million. But, they also saw decent numbers from Argenza net sales. That was at 16.4 million.
Okay, interesting.
And then contract manufacturing activities added another 13.1 million to the total.
So, okay, partnerships. It sounds like they're really starting to pay off.
Seems to be.
But obviously, drug development, we know it's not cheap. So let's talk about their spending for R&D.
Yeah, it's definitely not. And you can see that reflected in their R&D expenses. They jumped up to 177.2 million this year. That's up from 166.6 million they spent the year before.
Got it.
So a lot of this extra cash is going towards their pipeline. They've got their ADC portfolio, their preclinical antibody-drug conjugates, and then you've got Lorgerlamab, the bispecific antibody, that's eating up a lot of the budget, or at least a decent chunk of it. They've also got MGC028, a key pipeline asset they're pushing forward. And, we got to talk about SG&A as well. Those expenses went up to 71 million, and that's partly because of the fee they had to pay when they sold off Argenza. Plus, stock-based compensation's going up.
Right. And of course, speaking of the Argenza sale, that was a pretty big move for them, right? I mean, brought in some cash.
It did. They managed to get 36.3 million out of that deal with Tracera Therapeutics. But even with that gain, their net loss for the year actually got bigger. It's at 67 million now compared to 9.1 million the year before.
Okay, so it sounds like they're strategically making some investments and taking some hits in the short term, which is, honestly, you see it a lot in biotech. But of course, we always got to talk about the cash runway. How much do they have on hand?
So right now, they're sitting on 201.7 million in cash equivalents, and marketable securities as of the end of 2024.
Okay.
Now, the good news is they're projecting that this plus whatever's coming in from their partnerships should be enough to keep the lights on until the second half of 2026.
Okay, that's a decent runway. Definitely gives them some breathing room.
It does.
So now let's dive into some specific programs they're working on. Let's talk about Vobra Duo. They've decided to halt internal development for now, but they are open to partnerships. What led to that decision?
Well, it sounds like they did a pretty thorough review of the phase 2 Tamarack study data. This was for their metastatic castration-resistant prostate cancer treatment, MCRPC for short. And while they did see a decent median radiographic progression-free survival, like 9.5 to 10 months, they also had to consider the safety profile. They're weighing the benefits and risks.
Right.
And I think in the end, they feel that B7H3, the target they're going after with Vobra Duo, is still promising. But they think they have a better horse to bet on with MGC026.
Okay, so another B7H3 targeting drug.
Exactly. It's another ADC, but with some key differences. It's got a different linker and a different payload. And they're hoping that'll lead to a better tolerability profile.
Interesting. So less of those nasty side effects they saw earlier?
Potentially, yeah. Fewer pleural effusions, hopefully. They're learning as they go.
Got it. Okay, so streamline the B7H3 efforts. Focus on the one that seems like it's got the best shot. That makes sense.
Yeah, definitely strategic.
Now let's shift gears and talk about Lorgerlamab, their PD-1/CTLA-4 bispecific antibody. A lot going on there, it seems.
Absolutely. So they've finished enrolling patients for their phase 2 LORIKEET trial. That one's looking at Lorgerlamab plus docetaxel, which is a chemotherapy, in second-line patients with MCRPC. Guys who haven't had chemo yet for their metastatic castration-resistant prostate cancer. The main thing they're tracking is radiographic progression-free survival, and we should be getting some updated clinical data from that trial later this year in the second half.
Okay, cool. Now, we all know MCRPC has been a tough nut to crack for checkpoint inhibitors. What makes them think Lorgerlamab could be different?
Well, there are some promising early signals from both phase 1 and phase 2 studies. They're seeing some activity even in MCRPC, which is a tumor type that's usually considered, I guess you could say cold, doesn't really respond well to immunotherapy.
Right.
Now, the thing about Lorgerlamab is It's a bispecific antibody. It blocks both PD-1 and CTLA-4, two of those key immune checkpoints. But it's also engineered to activate T cells specifically within the tumor microenvironment. So the idea is it can kind of overcome some of those resistance mechanisms that have been tripping up other checkpoint inhibitors. More targeted approach, you could say.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And it sounds like they're not just stopping at prostate cancer with this one, right? They're looking at some other cancers, some pretty tough ones in the gynecological area.
Exactly. They've got this new phase 2 study in the works called LINET.
Okay.
This time it's Lorgerlamab monotherapy, so just the drug on its own, no combo. And they're going after platinum-resistant ovarian cancer, or PROC, and then clear cell gynecologic cancer, which is CCGC. Enrollment should be kicking off by mid-2025. And for this one, they're really focused on the overall response rate. How many patients actually see their tumors shrink or even disappear?
And those are two really tough cancers to treat. I mean, we know they haven't responded well to the existing checkpoint inhibitors. So what's the logic behind trying Lorgerlamab in these cases specifically?
I think it goes back to that selective T cell activation within the tumor. They believe that mechanism, the way Lorgerlamab works, might be able to overcome those limitations they've seen with the older checkpoint inhibitors.
Okay, so maybe it can get to places other drugs haven't been able to.
Exactly. And we know from the LORIKEET trial, it seems to play well with chemotherapy. So that opens up possibilities for combo therapies down the line, maybe with ADCs, maybe with tyrosine kinase inhibitors. There are options.
Lots of potential avenues to explore there. So it sounds like they're really being strategic, focusing on areas where this particular drug could be a real game changer, focusing on patients who really need new options.
Absolutely.
All right, let's switch gears again, talk about their antibody-drug conjugate portfolio. The ADCs, this is all part of their collaboration with CineFix, right? They've got a bunch of ADCs in various stages of development.
Yeah, that's right. The whole CineFix collaboration is built around this topoisomerase 1 inhibitor payload.
Yeah.
And right now they've got 3 ADCs using that tech that are in the pipeline. The furthest along is MGC026. That one targets B7H3, same as Vobra Duo. And that's currently in phase 1 dose escalation study for patients with advanced solid tumors. The plan is to move to dose expansion in specific tumor types sometime in 2025, but they haven't said exactly which cancers they'll be focusing on yet.
So we've talked about B7H3 now with Vobra Duo and MGC026. What makes MGC026 different? Why are they still so interested in B7H3?
So MGC026 takes a different approach compared to Vobra Duo. It's got that clinically active antibody variable domain that was also in Vobra Duo, but it's got a different linker, and it uses that CineFix topoisomerase 1 inhibitor payload.
Okay.
And based on preclinical data, this combo could be better, potentially, better profile than other topoisomerase 1 inhibitors out there.
Interesting.
And really important, they're hoping it'll have a better safety profile, trying to get away from those pleural effusions they saw with Vobra Duo.
So basically taking what they learned from Vobra Duo, making a next-gen version that goes after the same target, but hopefully with fewer side effects.
Exactly. They're iterating, improving.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now, what about the other ADCs they're working on? Are they going after any new target?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So next up is MGC028. This one targets ADM9. They just got the IND clearance for that, and the first patient was dosed pretty recently. It's a phase 1 study for advanced solid tumors. Now, preclinical studies looked pretty good. They saw some good anti-tumor activity in animals and no ocular toxicity in primates, which is always a concern with certain payloads. So that's good news.
Oh, definitely.
For the phase 1, they're focusing on pancreatic cancer, lung cancer, and cholangiocarcinoma initially. You know, those cancers tend to have high ADM9 expression, but they could definitely expand to other cancers that express ADM9 down the road.
Interesting. So ADM9, that's a new target, right?
Yes, definitely a novel target.
And then they've got MGC030, right?
Right. Still in preclinical development. They're being pretty tight-lipped about the target for that one. But they've said it's expressed in several solid tumors, and there's nothing approved to target it yet. IND submission is expected in 2026, if all goes well.
Okay, so ADM9, this secret target for MGC030, I mean, this is a company that's really pushing the envelope.
Yeah.
Going after these new targets, really trying to find new ways to fight cancer.
Absolutely. Seems like their ADC strategy is all about finding those high unmet medical needs and making ADCs that are both more effective and safer.
And of course, they're not just looking at efficacy, they're also looking at safety, which is critical. I mean, those preclinical primate studies for both MGC026 and MGC028, they were able to go up to really high doses with no serious toxicity. That's pretty encouraging.
Very encouraging. Bodes well for the human trials.
No, we can't forget about their T-cell engager, MGD024. What's the latest with that one?
Right. So MGD024, it's a DART molecule, dual affinity retargeting. Targets both CD133 and CD3. And that one's in a phase 1 dose escalation study right now. It's for patients with relapsed or refractory CD133 positive hematologic malignancies. So think AML, acute myeloid leukemia, and MDS, myelodysplastic syndromes. They're being really careful with the dose escalation, taking it slow, as per FDA expectations. Got to thoroughly characterize any potential adverse events.
Always got to be cautious.
Absolutely. But here's the interesting thing. Gilead has an option to license MGD024.
Oh, wow.
They can jump in at certain points during the phase 1, and we might get a decision from them this year.
Okay, so that's definitely something to keep an eye on, a potential near-term catalyst there.
Absolutely.
Now, last but not least, the call also mentioned some leadership changes. The CEO is on the lookout for a successor. What's the potential impact of that?
Yeah, the board is actively searching for a new CEO. The current CEO is committed to sticking around to ensure a smooth transition. Now, anytime you have a change at the top, there's going to be some uncertainty. That's just natural. But it sounds like they're really focused on making this a seamless handover, hopefully minimizing any disruptions to their research and development and their overall strategy.
Well, let's take a step back and look at the big picture. It seems like Macrogenix made a lot of progress this year in advancing their clinical pipeline, especially with their ADCs and with Lorgerlamab continuing to show promise. We saw really strong revenue growth, thanks in large part to those collaborations. But of course, they're also investing heavily in R&D, which is driving that net loss. But they've got a solid cash runway, so that buys them some time. For our listeners who are experienced investors, what are the key takeaways from this earnings call? What should they be paying attention to going forward?
I think the big takeaway is their partnerships are paying off. That revenue growth is a clear sign of that. And yeah, they're spending more on R&D, but they're also going after some really interesting and potentially game-changing therapies. That extended cash runway is crucial because it lets them stay focused on execution. No immediate financial pressure. And strategically, they're going after those areas of high unmet need. You know, the ADM9, that undisclosed target for MGC030, Lorgerlamab's unique way of targeting T cells. It's all about finding those niches where they can make a real difference. The fact that they're looking for a partner for Vobra Duo, that tells me they're being smart with their resources, focusing on the programs they think have the biggest potential. And then you've got the Linnet study. That could be huge. If Lorgerlamab shows efficacy in those gynecological cancers, those have been notoriously hard to treat. And then you've got the ADC platform as a whole. They're making real progress there. MGC026 moving towards dose expansion, MGC028 in phase 1. So yeah, lots of potential catalysts on the horizon.
Lots to watch, for sure. All right, it's time for our This Is Not Financial Advice segment, where we, put on our speculation hats for a minute and try to come up with an outrageous but plausible trade idea based on what we've been talking about. So what kind of crazy idea are you cooking up today?
All right, so Macrogenix decided to try to partner Vobra Duo, even though the progression-free survival data looked pretty good.
Yeah. So here's my thought. What about going long on a smaller, really specialized contract research organization, a CRO?
Okay.
Specifically, one with a track record of taking those cast-off assets from big pharma and biotech companies and actually turning them into something, rescuing them, developing them, making them successful.
Interesting.
My thinking is Macrogenix is looking for a partner, right? Someone to take Vobra Duo and run with it. And a good CRO, one with the right expertise, could be a perfect fit. Now, if they announce a partnership with a CRO like that, that could be a huge boost for the CRO stock. So it's kind of a bet on Macrogenix making a smart business development move that ends up creating an opportunity for a smaller player.
I like it. It's that second order effect, thinking a step ahead.
All right, that wraps up our deep dive into Macrogenix Q4 2024 earnings call. We hope this gave you some valuable information, some food for thought as you make your own investment decisions. What stood out to you from this conversation? What are you most curious about? Their ADC strategy, maybe? Or Lorgerlamab's potential in those difficult-to-treat gynecological cancers? Whatever it is, let us know. And as always, remember, this is not financial advice. Do your own research. Talk to your financial advisor. Make informed decisions. And join us next time on Talk Tickers for another deep dive into an important earnings call.
See you then.
Bye, everybody.